Part 2. The days after the failed negotiations were quiet. The starward horizon remained in orbit around the Corvani homeworld, waiting for orders from Earth. Captain Mitchell spent most of her time writing reports. The crew grew restless. Many of them wanted to leave this cold system and find friendlier species elsewhere. But Daniel could not stop thinking about Valaria. Her words echoed in his mind. You bow correctly. You speak with respect. Why? It was such a simple question, but it revealed so much. She was curious about him. She wanted to understand. On the 5th day, Daniel made a decision. He drafted a private message and sent it on an encrypted frequency. He addressed it to Princess Valaria of the Eternal House. He did not ask for political favors or trade agreements. He asked a simple question. He had read that Corvani poetry was considered the highest form of art among her people, but the Galactic archives contained almost no examples. Would she be willing to share some with him? He wanted to learn, nothing more. He did not expect a response. The Corvani had made their position clear. Contact was forbidden. But 3 days later, in the middle of the night, his console lit up with an incoming message. The message was from Valaria. It came through a hidden frequency that even the ship's systems had trouble detecting. She had gone to great lengths to hide this communication from her father's court. Her words were careful. She said that no outsider had ever asked to learn from the Corvani. Other species came with demands. They wanted resources, technology, military alliances. But this human had asked for poetry. She did not understand him, and she wanted to. Daniel smiled as he read her message. He wrote back immediately. He thanked her for responding. He told her that he had always believed that understanding a culture's art was the key to understanding its soul. He asked about her favorite poems and what they meant to her. Their correspondence grew over the following weeks. Valaria shared ancient verses with Daniel. She explained the hidden meanings in each line, the way Corvani poets used metaphor and rhythm to express emotions that their strict society did not allow them to show openly. Daniel was fascinated. The poetry was beautiful and sad, full of longing for something that could never be named. In return, Daniel shared human poetry with Valaria. He sent her works by poets who had lived centuries ago, people who had written about love and loss and the desperate need to connect with others. Valaria read them over and over. She said that human poetry was strange. It was raw and unpolished compared to Corvani work, but it felt honest. It felt real. Their conversations moved beyond poetry. Valaria began to ask questions about Earth. What did the sky look like? What did humans eat? How did they choose their partners? Daniel answered every question with patience and detail. He painted pictures with words, describing sunsets over oceans and the sound of rain on rooftops. Valaria told him about her own life. She was the third daughter of the Eternal King. In Corvani society, this meant she had little political value. Her older sisters would inherit power. Valaria was expected to marry someone chosen by her father and spend her life in quiet service to the crown. But Valaria had never fit into the role expected of her. She asked too many questions. She read forbidden texts from alien worlds. She looked at the stars and wondered what lay beyond the borders of her father's kingdom. Among the Corvani, curiosity was considered a weakness, a flaw of character. Valaria had spent her entire life being told that something was wrong with her. Daniel understood that feeling. He had grown up on Earth in a small town where everyone expected him to become a farmer, like his father. But Daniel had always wanted more. He had dreamed of the stars since he was a child. His neighbors thought he was strange. His family did not understand him. He had left Earth at 18 and never looked back. He told Valaria this story. He told her that on Earth, people who asked questions were called curious, not broken. Scientists who challenged old ideas were celebrated, not punished. Artists who saw the world differently were praised, not silenced. Valeria was quiet for a long time after receiving this message. When she finally responded, her words were different, softer. She said that no one had ever told her that her nature was a gift rather than a curse. She said that speaking with Daniel made her feel less alone than she had ever felt in her entire life. Daniel felt something shift inside his chest. He realized that this was no longer just a cultural exchange. He cared about Valeria. He cared about her happiness, her dreams, her future. He had never met her in person. He had never seen her face, but he felt connected to her in a way he could not explain. The weeks continued to pass. Their messages grew longer and more personal. Valeria told Daniel about her fears. She was afraid of spending her life trapped behind walls, married to a stranger, never seeing the wonders that existed beyond her world. Daniel told her about his own fears. He was afraid of dying alone, of never finding someone who truly understood him. One night, Valeria sent a message that made Daniel's heart stop. She told him that she had started to feel something she did not understand. When she read his words, she felt warm inside. When she thought about him, she smiled beneath her veil. She did not know what this feeling was called. She only knew that she did not want it to end. Daniel read the message 3 times. Then he wrote back. He told her that humans had a name for this feeling. And he felt it too. The silence that followed was the longest of his life. But when her response finally came, it contained only 4 words. I love you too. Daniel sat in the darkness of his quarters, holding those words close to his heart. He knew that what they had was impossible. She was a princess of an ancient alien race. He was a simple human communications officer. Their worlds did not mix. Their peoples did not understand each other. But love did not care about such things. Love built its own bridges, and Daniel was determined to find a way to cross the distance between them, no matter what it cost. He did not know that their secret had already been discovered. He did not know that forces were moving against them, forces that would soon tear their fragile connection apart. But for now, in this quiet moment, he allowed himself to hope. Ambassador Theric had always been a careful man. He watched, he listened, he noticed things that others missed. And he had noticed that the human communications officer seemed far too interested in Corvani culture. At first, Theric dismissed his suspicions. Humans were strange creatures, full of odd behaviors and meaningless curiosities. But when his spies reported unusual encrypted signals being sent to the planet's surface, his attention sharpened. Someone was communicating in secret, and Theric intended to find out who. It took his agents 2 weeks to trace the signals. When they finally identified the recipient, Theric felt the blood drain from his face. The third daughter, Princess Valeria. She had been exchanging messages with the human, dozens of them, perhaps hundreds. Theric brought his findings to the Eternal King immediately. The king was an old man, with white hair and eyes like frozen steel. His name was Forath, and he had ruled the Corvani for over 200 years. He listened to Theric's report, without expression. When it was finished, he dismissed the ambassador with a single wave of his hand. That night, Valeria was summoned to the throne room. She walked through the empty halls, with her heart pounding beneath her robes. She knew why her father had called her. She could see it in the eyes of the guards who escorted her. They looked at her with disgust, with disappointment. The throne room was vast and cold. Giant pillars of black stone rose toward a ceiling lost in shadow. The Eternal King sat upon his throne, and his gaze followed Valeria as she approached and knelt before him. You have betrayed your family, Vorath said. His voice was quiet, but it filled the room like thunder. You have communicated with the outsider, in secret, against my direct orders. Valeria kept her eyes on the floor. Father, I can explain. Explain? The king's voice grew harder. Explain why my daughter has been trading words with a human like some lovesick fool. Explain why you have brought shame upon the eternal house. Valeria lifted her chin. Behind her veil, her eyes burned with defiance. I have brought no shame. I have only spoken with someone who wished to understand us, someone who showed us respect when others showed only fear. Respect. The king spat the word like it was poison. The humans respect nothing. They are children playing among the stars, too young and foolish to understand the ancient ways, and you have lowered yourself to their level. Daniel is different, Valeria said. She had not meant to say his name. It slipped out before she could stop it. The king's eyes narrowed. Daniel, you speak his name with familiarity. How far has this gone, daughter? What have you shared with this creature? Valeria remained silent. Her silence was answer enough. The eternal king rose from his throne. He was tall despite his age, and his shadow fell over Valeria like a dark cloud. You are confined to your chambers. You will speak to no one. You will send no messages, and you will forget this human ever existed. Do you understand? Valeria wanted to argue. She wanted to scream, but she knew it would be useless. So she bowed her head and let the guards lead her away. On the starward horizon, Daniel waited for a message that never came. 1 day passed, then 2, then 5. By the 8th day, Daniel was pacing his quarters like a caged animal. Something was wrong. Valeria had never gone this long without responding. Something had happened to her. He tried sending messages, but they bounced back unanswered. He tried different frequencies, different codes. Nothing worked. The silence was absolute. On the 12th day, Daniel made a choice. He knew it might cost him everything, but he could not sit in safety while Valeria suffered alone. He waited until the night shift, when the bridge crew was thin. Then he slipped down to the shuttle bay and climbed into the smallest transport vessel. His fingers moved across the controls with practiced ease. The bay doors opened, and he flew out into the darkness of space. He descended toward the Corvani homeworld, broadcasting on Valeria's private frequency. He did not know if she could hear him. He did not know if anyone was listening. But he spoke anyway. Valeria, I am coming. I do not know what has happened, but I will find you. I promise. The Corvani defense systems detected him within minutes. Warships rose to intercept. Daniel did not try to run. He landed his shuttle in a field outside the capital city and stepped out with his hands raised. The guards surrounded him immediately. They were tall and silent, their faces hidden behind helmets of polished metal. They bound his wrists with chains and marched him through the streets of the city. People stopped to stare. No human had ever walked these roads before. They brought him to the palace. They dragged him through corridors of black stone and silver light. They threw him onto the floor of the throne room, where the eternal king waited with cold fury in his eyes. The human has come to us, Vorath said. He has violated our borders. He has trespassed upon sacred ground. The punishment for this crime is death. Daniel lifted his head. His wrists ached from the chains, and his body was bruised from rough handling. But his voice was steady when he spoke. I came because I care for your daughter. I came because silence is worse than any punishment you could give me. If you want to kill me, then do it. But know that I regret nothing. The king stared at him. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the doors of the throne room burst open, and Valeria ran inside. The guards tried to stop her, but she pushed past them with strength no one expected from a princess. She ran to the center of the room and stood between Daniel and her father. "You will not harm him," she said. Her voice shook, but it did not break. "Step aside, daughter," the king commanded. "This does not concern you." "It concerns me more than anyone." Valaria turned to face the court. Dozens of nobles watched from the shadows. Priests, advisors, all the most powerful people in the kingdom. And then she did something that made them all gasp. She reached up and removed her veil. Her face was beautiful. Silver markings traced delicate patterns across her pale skin. Her eyes were wide and shining with tears. She looked at Daniel, and he saw everything in that gaze. Fear, hope, love. "I claim him," Valaria said. Her voice rang through the silent hall. "By the ancient laws, I claim this man as my bonded. He is mine, and I am his. You cannot execute him without executing me." The court erupted into chaos. Nobles shouted, priests wailed. The king stood frozen, his face a mask of shock and betrayal. But Valaria did not look away from Daniel. She crossed the room and knelt beside him, her unveiled face only inches from his own. "I told you I loved you," she whispered. "Did you think I did not mean it?" Daniel smiled. Despite everything, despite the chains, despite the danger, despite the impossible odds. "I never doubted you for a moment," he said. Part 4. The throne room remained in chaos for nearly an hour. Nobles argued with priests. Guards stood uncertain, not knowing whether to arrest the princess or protect her. The eternal king sat on his throne in silence, his ancient face unreadable. Valaria had broken the most sacred rule of the royal family. She had shown her face to an outsider. By doing so, she had declared a bond that could not be undone. The law was clear on this matter. It had been written 10,000 years ago, and no king had ever challenged it. But the law had never imagined that a princess would bond herself to an alien. Ambassador Theric was the first to speak coherently. He approached the throne and bowed low. "Your Majesty, this is unprecedented. The third daughter has claimed a human as her bonded. The law protects this bond, but the law also provides an alternative." The king's eyes moved slowly to Theric. "Speak." "The trial of souls." Theric straightened. "It has not been used in 500 years, but it remains valid. If an outsider claims worthiness to join a noble house, they may prove themselves through the trial. If they succeed, the bond is recognized and honored. If they fail, both parties are stripped of name and status and cast out forever." Murmurs spread through the crowd. The trial of souls was legendary. It was said to break the strongest warriors and shatter the wisest minds. No outsider had ever passed it. The eternal king considered this. His eyes moved from Theric to Valaria to Daniel, who still knelt in chains on the cold floor. Finally he rose from his throne. "The trial will be held," he announced. "The human will face the 3 challenges. If he proves worthy, I will accept the bond. If he fails, both he and my daughter will leave this world and never return." He looked directly at Daniel. "Do you accept these terms, human?" Daniel met the king's gaze without flinching. "I accept." The guards removed his chains and led him to a small chamber where he would wait until the trial began. Valaria was not allowed to see him. She was taken to her quarters under heavy guard, her fate now tied completely to his success or failure. The trial began at dawn. The first challenge was called the Maze of Echoes. Daniel was led to an ancient structure on the outskirts of the city. It was made of black stone that seemed to absorb light. The entrance was a simple archway, but beyond it lay darkness so complete that it felt alive. The priest who guided him explained the rules. The maze would show him his deepest fears. It would use his own memories against him. Many who entered never found their way out. Their minds broke, and they wandered the corridors until they died. Daniel stepped into the darkness. At first, there was nothing, just empty silence and the sound of his own breathing. Images appeared around him, floating in the air like ghosts. He saw himself as a child, sitting alone at lunch, while other children laughed and played. He saw the look on his father's face when Daniel told him he wanted to leave Earth. Disappointment, confusion, the sense that his own son was a stranger to him. He saw every moment of rejection, every time someone had looked at him and decided he was not worth knowing. Every night he had spent alone on distant ships, wondering if he would ever find a place where he truly belonged. The visions pressed against him, trying to crush his spirit. But Daniel kept walking. He had lived through these moments once. They had hurt him, but they had not destroyed him. He was still here. He was still fighting. After what felt like hours, he saw light ahead. He walked toward it and emerged from the maze. The priests waiting outside looked surprised. They had expected him to fail. The second challenge was the debate of truths. Daniel was brought before the High Council of the Corvani. 12 elders sat in a half-circle, their faces stern and judgmental. They would question him about humanity. They would challenge him to defend his species' right to exist among the stars. The first elder spoke. Humans are violent. Your history is written in blood. Wars, genocides, the destruction of your own world's environment. Why should we accept such a species as worthy? Daniel nodded slowly. You are right. Humans have done terrible things. We have hurt each other and damaged our planet. I will not deny this. The council seemed surprised by his honesty. They had expected him to argue or make excuses. But violence is not all we are, Daniel continued. We are also capable of great kindness. We build hospitals to heal the sick. We create art that moves the soul. We reach out to strangers, not because we expect something in return, but because we believe that connection is valuable for its own sake. The second elder spoke. You live such short lives. 80 years, perhaps 100. What can such brief creatures understand about the universe? Perhaps our short lives are our greatest strength, Daniel replied. We know that our time is limited, so we do not waste it. We chase our dreams with urgency. We love with passion because we know that every moment is precious. A species that lives forever might become complacent, but humans never stop striving. The third elder leaned forward. You are one human. Why should we judge your entire species by your words alone? Daniel smiled. Because every species is made of individuals, and every individual has the power to choose who they will be. I cannot speak for all humans, but I can show you what one human is capable of. I can show you that we are worthy of a chance. The council deliberated for a long time. When they finished, the head elder announced that Daniel had passed the second challenge. The third and final challenge was the most difficult. It was called the Confession of Truth. Daniel was brought to a sacred chamber, deep beneath the palace. There were no judges here, no audience, just himself and a single flame burning on an altar of white stone. The priest explained that the flame would respond to his words. If he spoke the deepest truth in his heart, the flame would burn bright and pure. If he lied or held back, the flame would die, and he would fail. Daniel stood before the altar. He thought about what truth he could offer, what secret lived in the deepest part of his soul. He closed his eyes and began to speak. All my life I have been searching for connection. I grew up feeling different from everyone around me. I thought that if I traveled far enough, saw enough of the universe, I would finally find a place where I belonged. But no matter where I went, I was always alone. The flame flickered, but held steady. When I met Valaria, something changed. For the first time, someone saw me, really saw me. Not just the surface, but everything underneath. The fears I hide, the hopes I'm afraid to speak. She understood me in a way no one ever has. Tears formed in his eyes, but he did not wipe them away. I am not ashamed to be vulnerable. I am not ashamed to admit that I need others. Humans are taught that strength means standing alone. But I have learned that true strength is allowing yourself to be known. True courage is opening your heart, even when you know it might be broken. The flame burned brighter than it had in centuries. Pure white light filled the chamber, so intense that Daniel had to shield his eyes. When the light faded, the priest fell to his knees. "The flame has accepted you," he whispered. "You have passed the trial of souls." Daniel stood in the sacred chamber, his heart pounding. He had done it. He had proven himself worthy. Now he could claim the woman he loved. H1, Part 5. News of Daniel's success spread through the palace like wildfire. No outsider had ever completed the trial of souls. Many had believed it was impossible. Yet this human, this simple communications officer from a young and unremarkable species, had done what warriors and diplomats from a dozen ancient civilizations had failed to do. The Eternal King received the news in silence. He sat alone in his private chambers, staring at the wall where portraits of his ancestors hung. His father, his grandfather, kings who had ruled for centuries, who had kept the Corvani safe by keeping them separate from the chaos of the outside universe. Vorath had always believed that isolation was strength. He had raised his daughters to accept this truth. But Valeria had never accepted it. She had always looked at the stars with hunger in her eyes. He had tried to suppress this quality in her, believing it would only bring her pain. Now, he wondered if he had been wrong. A servant announced that the human wished to speak with him privately. Vorath almost refused, but something made him hesitate. Perhaps it was curiosity. Perhaps it was the same quality that burned in his daughter's eyes, a quality he had spent his whole life trying to extinguish in himself. "Send him in," the king said. Daniel entered the chamber alone. He was still wearing the simple clothes he had arrived in, now dirty and torn from his ordeal. But he walked with dignity, and his eyes held no fear. "Your Majesty," Daniel bowed in the proper Corvani fashion, just as he had done in their first communications. "Thank you for seeing me." Vorath studied him for a long moment. "You have completed the trial. By our law, I must recognize your bond with my daughter. But law and acceptance are not the same thing. Tell me, human, why her? Of all the females in this galaxy, why did you choose my Valaria?" Daniel considered the question carefully before answering. "I did not choose her, Your Majesty. Not at first. We simply talked. We shared ideas and dreams and fears. And somewhere in that sharing, I realized that I had found something I had been searching for my entire life." "And what is that?" "Someone who sees the world the way I do. Someone who looks at the stars and feels wonder instead of fear. Someone who asks questions not because they expect easy answers, but because the asking itself is valuable." Daniel paused. "Your daughter is extraordinary. She has a mind that never stops seeking, and a heart that never stops hoping. Among my people, she would be celebrated. But here, she has been told that these qualities are flaws." The king's expression flickered. "You think I do not know my own daughter? I think you know her very well. I think you see yourself in her. And I think that frightens you." Silence fell between them. The king's hands tightened on the arms of his chair. For a moment, Daniel feared he had gone too far. Then Vorath let out a long breath. "You are bold, human. Bold and perhaps foolish, but not wrong." He looked away. "When I was young, I asked the same questions Valeria asks. I dreamed the same dreams. My father punished me for it. He said that curiosity was dangerous, that it would lead our people to destruction. I learned to suppress that part of myself. I learned to be the king he wanted me to be. And now you have tried to make Valeria do the same, Daniel said. I thought I was protecting her. The king's voice was heavy with regret. I thought I was saving her from pain, but perhaps I was only passing on the pain that was given to me. Daniel stepped closer. Your Majesty, your people have survived for thousands of years by staying hidden. But survival is not the same as living. The universe is full of wonders your people have never seen, ideas they have never considered, connections they have never made. Valeria understands this. She wants to build bridges, not walls. And you believe humans can help us do this? I believe we can learn from each other. Humans are young and imperfect. We make mistakes, but we also grow. We adapt. We reach out to others because we know that we are stronger together than we are apart. Daniel smiled. That is not weakness, that is wisdom. The Eternal King was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than Daniel had ever heard it. My daughter chose well. The next day, a ceremony was held in the great hall of the palace. Every noble, priest, and council member attended. The Eternal King stood before his throne and announced that the bond between Princess Valeria and the human Daniel Hayes was recognized by the crown. But that was not all. The king announced that the Corvani would enter into limited diplomatic relations with humanity. Trade delegations would be permitted. Cultural exchanges would begin. The walls that had stood for 10,000 years would not fall overnight, but the first cracks had appeared. When the ceremony ended, Valeria found Daniel on a balcony overlooking the city. She no longer wore her veil. Her silver-marked face was visible for all to see, and she did not try to hide it. She was done hiding. You changed everything, she said, standing beside him. You know that, don't you? Daniel shook his head. I did not change anything. I just asked the right questions. You are the one who had the courage to answer them. Valeria smiled. It was a small smile, hesitant and hopeful. She was still learning how to show her emotions openly. But it was real. It was her. What happens now? She asked. Now we figure it out together. Daniel took her hand. Among the Corvani, touch was rare and meaningful. He knew what this gesture meant to her. There will be challenges. Your people will need time to accept me. My people will need to understand yours. It will not be easy. Nothing worth having is easy. Valeria squeezed his hand. My whole life I was told that my nature was a flaw, that my questions had no answers, that my dreams were foolish, but you showed me that I was not broken. You showed me that somewhere in the universe there are others who see things the way I do. There are, Daniel said, more than you know. They stood together as the twin suns of the Corvani system began to set. The sky turned colors that Daniel had never seen before, shades of purple and gold that did not exist on Earth. He thought about how far he had traveled to reach this moment. All the lonely nights, all the failed connections, all the times he had wondered if he would ever find his place. And now here he was, standing on an alien world, holding the hand of a princess who had risked everything to be with him. It felt like a dream, but it was real. You know, Valeria said softly, your people have a word that I find beautiful. It does not translate into my language. There is no equivalent. What word? Hope. She turned to look at him, her pale eyes reflecting the fading light. For the Corvani, the future is something to be feared, something to be controlled. But for humans, the future is something to be welcomed, something to reach toward. That is what hope means, isn't it? The belief that tomorrow can be better than today. Daniel nodded. That's exactly what it means. Valeria leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. It was a gesture of trust and intimacy that would have been unthinkable a few months ago. But everything had changed. She had changed. "I have hope now," she whispered, "because of you." Daniel put his arm around her and held her close. The suns dipped below the horizon, and the first stars began to appear. Somewhere among those stars was Earth. Somewhere out there were countless other worlds waiting to be discovered. Humanity's greatest strength was not their technology. It was not their ambition or their courage. It was their ability to connect, to reach across the void and find kinship in the most unexpected places. To look at a stranger and see not an enemy, but a friend. Daniel had spent his whole life searching for connection, and he had found it in the last place anyone would have expected, with an alien princess who had been as lonely as he was. With a people who had forgotten how to hope. But now, together, they would remember. They would build bridges across the stars, and they would never be alone again. Part 1. The stars looked different from the edge of the Volantis system. Daniel Hayes stood at the observation window of the starward horizon and watched the distant suns burn against the endless black. He had been traveling through space for 7 years now, but the views still made him feel small. Small and yet somehow part of something much bigger than himself. Daniel was 34 years old. He had brown hair that was always a little messy, and tired eyes that had seen too many diplomatic failures. He served as the chief communications officer aboard the exploration vessel, a job that most people found boring. But Daniel loved it. He believed that words could build bridges where weapons only built walls. The ship had been drifting through the outer reaches of the system for 3 weeks. They were searching for signs of a species called the Corvani. The galactic community knew little about them. They were old, perhaps one of the oldest civilizations still existing. They kept to themselves. They did not welcome visitors. Captain Laura Mitchell was a tall woman with sharp features and a voice that commanded respect. She called Daniel to the bridge on a cold Tuesday morning. Her face was serious when he arrived. "We found something," she said. She pointed at the main screen. A signal was coming from the 4th planet in the system. It was not random noise. It was a message. Daniel sat down at his station and began to work. The language was complex. Each word seemed to have multiple meanings depending on the tone used. It took him 6 hours to translate the first sentence. It was a warning. It told them to leave and never return. But Captain Mitchell did not want to leave. Humanity had been reaching out to new species for decades now. Some welcomed them, others feared them. The Corvani were different. They looked at humans the way humans might look at insects. This attitude bothered many people, but it made Daniel curious. He asked permission to respond to the message. The captain agreed, though she warned him to be careful. Daniel crafted his reply slowly. He did not demand anything. He did not threaten. He simply introduced himself and expressed a desire to learn. 3 days passed with no response. Then on the 4th day, a new message arrived. It was an invitation to speak, but nothing more. The Corvani made it clear that speaking did not mean friendship. It was merely a test to see if humans were worth their time. The first diplomatic session happened through a video link. The Corvani ambassador appeared on screen. His name was Theric, and his face was long and pale, with silver markings along his cheeks. His eyes were large and dark, and they showed no emotion at all. He wore robes of deep purple, and spoke in a flat tone that made everything sound like a command. Theric asked why humans had come. Daniel explained that they were explorers. They wanted to learn about other cultures and share their own. Theric seemed unimpressed. He said the Corvani had no need for what humans could offer. They had existed for thousands of years without outside help, and they would continue to do so. Daniel did not argue. He simply listened. He noticed that the Corvani valued patience. They did not like to be rushed. So he let the silences stretch and did not try to fill them with nervous words. Theric seemed slightly surprised by this, though his face barely changed. At the end of the session, another figure appeared on the screen. She stood behind Theric, silent and still. She wore a silver veil that covered her entire face. Only her eyes were visible, and they were the color of pale moonlight. Theric introduced her as the third daughter of the Eternal House. Her name was Valaria. She was a princess. Valaria did not speak. She simply watched. But Daniel felt her gaze on him like a physical weight. There was something in those eyes, something that did not match the cold formality of the rest of her people. He saw curiosity there. He saw hunger. The session ended, and the screen went dark. Captain Mitchell asked Daniel for his assessment. He told her that the Corvani were proud and isolated, but not beyond reach. They had agreed to speak again. That was a start. Over the next 2 weeks, Daniel learned everything he could about Corvani culture. He read their poetry, studied their history, and memorized their complex system of honorifics. He learned that their society was built on strict rules. The royal family was considered sacred. They wore veils to separate themselves from common people. To show one's face was an act of deep intimacy, something done only between bonded partners. The second diplomatic session went much like the first. Theric asked questions and gave nothing in return. But Valaria was there again, standing in the shadows, watching. Daniel made sure to use proper Corvani greetings. He bowed at the correct angle and used the poetic forms of address that he had learned. Theric did not acknowledge these efforts. But Daniel saw Valaria tilt her head slightly. It was a small movement, barely noticeable, but it meant something. The third session was different. Theric announced that the Corvani High Council had decided to end negotiations. They saw no value in continued contact with humanity. The decision was final. Daniel felt disappointment settle in his chest. He had worked so hard, but he did not let it show on his face. Instead, he thanked Theric for his time. He said that humanity would respect the Council's wishes, but hoped that perhaps, someday, they might speak again. He was about to end the transmission when Valaria spoke for the first time. Her voice was soft and musical, like wind moving through silver bells. "You bow correctly," she said. "You speak with respect." "Why?" Theric turned to look at her, clearly surprised that she had spoken. Daniel took a moment before answering. "Because respect is not something you give only to those who can help you," he said. "It is something you give to those who deserve it, and your people have survived for thousands of years. That alone deserves respect." Valaria said nothing more, but her eyes stayed on him until the screen went dark. That night, Daniel sat alone in his quarters. He thought about the princess with the silver veil. He thought about the way she had looked at him, like she was searching for something she had lost long ago. He did not know what would happen next. But he knew, somehow, that their story was not over. It was only beginning.